Hello. Since I read a lot of recent books and new fiction, I have the bad habit of putting off reading older books and classics that I do really want to get to. So I find it useful to set myself a to be read pile, and I have picked out 8 titles that I want to get to before the end of 2024. A lot of them are quite short, so hopefully it'll be fairly realistic, and it's good to set myself a deadline too, because otherwise I'll just keep putting off reading them. And so I'm going to go through and discuss why I'm so interested in these books in particular and getting to them sooner rather than later, because there's special reading projects around them, or there are recent republications, or there's an anniversary around them, or there's a film being made of them. And it's always better to read the book before getting to the film. But I'd love to know if you have read any of these books, and if you would encourage me to read them soon, or if you're interested in reading along with me, please let me know about that in the comments below, or if there's any classics that you want to get to over the next few months. So first off, there is Charles Dickens' The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and of course October. There's a whole during October there's a whole read-along of Victober, and Katie Lumsden, the booktuber and author, she's hosting a read-along of this, which is Charles Dickens' final uncompleted novel. So before going into reading it, you'd have to be comfortable with knowing that, or not knowing how the end of the story will go, though it's still quite a substantial book. I think it's around 400 plus pages still, and so this draws upon a lot of sensationalist fiction of the time, and the style of that Wilkie Collins, Charles Dickens' buddy, was involved in. And I'm keen to. I've always wanted to read this. I've had this copy for ages. You can see I bought it for on sale for only £1.12, quite a long time ago. So it's been sitting on my shelves for ages and ages. And I've also heard that that some sections of the book can get quite hallucinatory in its tone, and I'm really keen to see how Dickens pulls that off. And so it's described as being about drug disappearances, sexual obsession, disguises, and a possible murder. And that just sounds like a fantastic story. And I was reminded of Dickens recently when I read Leif Shafak's new novel, where Charles Dickens is a character in that, and there are rivers in the sky. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to this, but also this edition comes with an introduction, so I think it'll be good to get some contextual information about the book as well. And it's been quite a while since I've read a Dickens, so I should get to one. Also, a friend recently asked me to recommend some good creepy fiction, and I was trying to think about some good classic creepy fiction, and was struggling. And one that I've been wanting to read for a while is this collection of short stories called In a Glass Darkly by Sheridan Le Fanu, who was an Irish author that drew upon Gothic traditions in literature, but also Irish folklore, and so he wrote these stories. He was working in the 1800s as well, long dead, and so he created these stories that kind of play with the border between supernatural and kind of psychological horror. And I have read one story in this collection, one of the longer stories, called Carmilla, which is very famous as it was an early vampiric tale, and also very famously has very strong lesbian overtones to it. And I found that really fascinating. I've been wanting to read more of the stories in this collection. And also, I had a teacher when I was at university, and who really specialized in Sheridan Le Fanu, and I have some of his work. I'm writing about this author's books. So yeah, I'd like to read the original material, and then go to read my professor's commentary on this author. And then some more modern classics that I want to get to. There's one of Muriel Sparks' earlier novels called The Public Image, and this is about a very glamorous and famous actress who feels pressure and need to maintain a public persona, and in a sort of certain way. And she has a loving husband, but one who kind of resents her celebrity and how she keeps up this like guise in public, and so plots to do something to disrupt it. And the question is whether her public persona and private self can sustain this kind of like sabotage that her husband has planned. And I've read a number of novels by Muriel Spark. She writes in such a way that's like very comic and cutting, but which is also like really interesting in how it looks at like social relations and pressures. And I think, you know, in our sort of celebrity age, I think this novel will probably have even more relevance. And I'm reading it as part of a special project which I'm planning and working on, and which I'll hopefully talk more about in a video in a few weeks or in a month or so. Then there is another collection of short stories that was recently republished by Diane Oliver, called Neighbors and Other Stories. And this was first published in the 60s, and it's an author who died in the 60s, and she was murdered, I think, when she was only 22 years old, and she was writing from a very unique perspective, because she was writing stories about how some schools in America were being racially integrated for the very first time, and she was the Black author that experienced firsthand a lot of the tensions that this created, and wrote about them in a very powerful way. And so yeah, it's really tragic. I'm thinking how, you know, her career was like cut short, and how it might have like developed if she had grown older. And so I think these stories will have a special poignancy to reading them now. But yeah, she has a lot of fan and authors like Jackie Kay and the great Irish short story writer Lucy Caldwell. So yeah, this will be very interesting to explore. Then there is another novel that was recently reprinted and has been out of print for a long time, called The World Next Door by Fritz Peters. And he was a really interesting author, and this novel is about a man, a World War II veteran who returns to America but is severely traumatized by that experience. And so it follows his mental health difficulties and his real struggle, and how he eventually goes to a mental institution because it becomes all too much. And it's seen as kind of like a precursor to the novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, in depicting the traumatic after effects of war, and also mental health facilities during this time in the 50s and 60s. And and Eudora Welty, the great author, was a fan of this writer. But yeah, his work has kind of like gone out of fashion. So I think it's really interesting that his books have been brought back into print. Then there's a very short reprint of a modern classic called Love's Work by Gillian Rose, who died in 1995, I think. And this book she was working on, and it came out in the same year that she died. So it's and she was a philosopher, and so it's very much reflecting on her own personal experiences and feelings of mortality, because she was aware she was dying, and so she's looking at childhood and friendship and faith and loss, but also love. And so the author Marina Warner is a fan of this book, and she says this small book contains multitudes. And yeah, it's quite a short book, so but it sounds like quite like a profound read. And then there is another memoir, which by Rosemary Sutcliff, who's a novelist, and called Blue Hills Remembered. And this was reprinted by Handheld Press that brings back into print a lot of great classic English authors, especially female authors. And this is her reflecting on the first, I think, 30 years of her life and how her own mother suffered from mental health difficulties, but she also suffered from a disease early on in her life, which was very physically debilitating, and how she would escape into fiction and literature as a way of kind of dealing with all of these physical issues that she was going through at the time. So it sounds like another very poignant book, but I also think it's meant to be like quite comic in parts and quite like touching, and so that it recounts like her interactions with her pet when she was younger, and so yeah, a lot of personal things like that. And finally, there's the modern classic I want to read for the first time of Queer by William S. Burroughs. And so he wrote this in the 1950s, but it wasn't actually published until 1985 because of its overt themes of homosexuality. And so this is looking at a man in Mexico City who becomes really obsessed with another man and is kind of trailing around him, and the emotional difficulties of that desired connection. And I'm very keen to read this because it was made into a film which will be coming out, I think, later this year, starring Daniel Craig, and so I'm very keen to see how this is brought onto the screen, because I think it's written in quite like well, it deals with like a realist love affair, but also parts of it are like quite hallucinatory and deals a lot with substance and drug abuse as well. And I also think it's a kind of like sequel to his novel Junkie, which I haven't read as well. And so I might go and get a library copy of Junkie before reading this. We'll see how much time I have. I don't think it's very long, and but yeah, we'll see if I want to try to get to it before the film comes out. So those are the classics and modern classics that I want to read before the end of this year. Like I said, let me know if you have read any of these books, if you would recommend them, or if you're interested in reading any of them now, or if there are any other classics that you are hoping to read soon, or participating in Victober or any other readathons that are coming up. Please let me know about that in the comments below. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.